In the space between heartbeats lives a girl who belongs to no one, not to the living who fear her shadow, nor to the dead who smell the betrayal of her mortal blood. Rain fell like broken glass against the infirmary window. Elena's hands trembled as she wiped the blood from a patient's forehead, human blood, warm and copper-thin on her tongue. She forced herself to swallow it down, to bury the hunger that clawed at her ribs like a caged animal. 23 years old, and she still didn't know what she was. The clinic in Bucharest's old quarter existed in whispers. People came here when they had nowhere else to go, when hospitals asked questions, when priests refused to bless them, when society had already written their obituaries. Elena moved among them like a ghost made solid, her pale fingers steady as she sutured wounds and measured doses of morphine. The other nurses kept their distance. They said her presence made the air cold. They said her eyes reflected nothing, not even candlelight. They were right. Her mother had been human, a chambermaid in some forgotten castle. Her father, a vampire lord who'd visited her in darkness, promised eternity, then disappeared when he learned what their union had created. A creature neither living nor dead, a Dhampir, a mistake. The hunger was constant, dual-edged. She needed blood to survive, but animal blood tasted like ash. Human blood set fire to her veins, but drinking it made her feel the weight of stolen life, a sensation her father's kind never bothered with. She was too slow to hunt with vampires, too strong to live among humans, too much like him, not enough like her. Elena finished her shift at midnight, pulling her gray coat tight as she walked through the cobblestone streets. Autumn had turned Bucharest into a portrait of decay. Dead leaves clinging to wrought iron gates, fog rolling through alleys where gas lamps flickered like dying eyes. She shouldn't have taken the shortcut through Lipscani. The tavern light spilled gold across the pavement, and from inside came the smell. Rich, dark, intoxicating. Vampire. Several of them, their presence like pressure against her temples. Elena's pace quickened. Mixing with their kind was dangerous. They could smell what she was: contamination, half-breed, unworthy. But one of them was already standing in the street. He emerged from the fog as if the mist itself had taken shape. Tall, shoulders broad enough to cast a shadow in darkness, eyes like molten amber in a face carved from marble. His coat was black velvet, his hands bare despite the cold, and when he looked at her, Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Recognition, not of him, of herself, finally, reflected in another's gaze. "What are you?" His voice was silk wrapped around a razor blade. "Nothing," Elena whispered. "No one." "You're lying." He stepped closer, and she could feel the centuries radiating from him, decades of blood and power and isolation. "You taste like both. Like neither. Like—" He paused, his expression shifting into something she couldn't name. Something that looked like hunger, but deeper, older. Like her. "Her who?" Elena's voice cracked. "My mate." The words fell like a sentence. "My blood mate. The one I've been searching for across 3 centuries. Elena's hands clenched into fists. This was a trap. It had to be. Vampire lords didn't claim Dhampirs. They hunted them. They eliminated them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, backing away. "You will." His eyes blazed like twin suns. "And when you do, you'll have to choose, Elena Marcu. Between the mother who abandoned you in hospitals and the father whose blood runs through your veins like a curse. Between the humanity that will never accept you and the eternity that finally will." He knew her name, her full name, a name she'd never told anyone. "Who are you?" she breathed. "Adrian Moldoveanu, king of the Carpathian Covenant." He smiled, and she saw fangs. Real fangs, ancient and terrible. "Your mate, your doom. Your salvation, if you're brave enough to take it. The rain fell harder, and Elena ran. Chapter 2. The King's Confession. A predator knows the exact moment prey decides to stop running, when exhaustion replaces fear and surrender becomes inevitable. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment above the pharmacy, curtains drawn, a knife trembling in her hand as if steel could cut through the invisible thread that now bound her to a stranger. Her hands still smelled like rain and his cologne, something ancient, like leather and burning roses. Adrian Moldoveanu, king of the Carpathian Covenant. She'd heard whispers of him in the darkest corners of the vampire underworld, tales told in hushed voices by those foolish enough to venture into vampire territory. They called him the Undying, the one who'd survived the Ottoman invasion, the Austro-Hungarian occupation, 2 world wars, and countless internal wars among his own kind. A leader who kept the peace not through cruelty, but through something worse, understanding. He didn't come for her that night, or the next. Elena waited, suspended in a state between terror and longing she couldn't name. The hunger in her grew sharper, more violent. Without human blood, she was weakening, her vision blurring at the edges, her movements sluggish, the cold seeping into her bones like a permanent winter. On the 3rd night, she found a letter slipped under her door. Come to the Moldoveanu estate at midnight. Come alone. Come willing, or I will come for you. Either way, this ends tonight. It was written in her own handwriting. Elena read it 4 times, each word burning deeper. How was that possible? She'd never written those words, and yet the ink was fresh, the paper warm, and her signature at the bottom was perfect. Muscle memory given form by someone else's will. She arrived at the estate at 11:47 p.m., counting down the minutes in her chest like a funeral bell. The gates were wrought iron, black as sin, covered in climbing roses that bloomed red as arterial spray. The mansion rose beyond them like a cathedral built to worship darkness. Gothic spires, stained glass windows glowing amber, stone so old it seemed to remember centuries. A servant opened the gates without a word, his eyes empty of life or judgment. Adrian was waiting in the library. Books rose from floor to ceiling, thousands of them, their leather spines glowing in candlelight. But it was him she saw first, standing at a window overlooking the Carpathian peaks, his silhouette sharp against the moon. He turned slowly, and Elena saw the exhaustion carved into his features. Not physical exhaustion, but something deeper. The weariness of a king who'd ruled alone for too long. You came, he said softly. I didn't want to. Elena's voice was ice. I know. He stepped closer, his footfalls soundless on the marble floor. That's what makes it matter. She wanted to hate him. The wanting was so fierce it nearly consumed her. But when he stopped 3 feet away and simply looked at her, really looked at her as if she were something precious instead of a mistake, something in her shattered. What do you want from me? She whispered. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. I was born in 1421, Elena. I've watched empires crumble to dust. I've loved 7 times, and each time I buried them, watched their beauty fade, their bodies wither, their souls vanish into whatever comes after. I've ruled a kingdom of monsters because it was easier than ruling my own heart. He paused. And then 3 nights ago, I smelled blood in the rain. Half human, half vampire. Perfect. Perfect for what? Elena stepped back. For a mate bond. Adrian's eyes gleamed. Do you understand what that means? It means your blood calls to mine. It means I can feel every thought, every fear, every moment of hunger that tears through you. It means... He swallowed hard. It means I've finally found someone who understands what it is to belong nowhere. Elena shook her head violently. You don't know me. You don't... I know you volunteer at a clinic for the dying because you understand suffering. I know you drink rainwater and eat almost nothing because human food tastes like betrayal. I know you've never killed anyone, though your hunger screams for it, because your mother's mercy lives in your bones despite everything. He moved closer. I know you, Elena Marcoux. I've been searching for you since the moment I realized eternity was a prison. Don't, her voice broke. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not. Adrian reached out, his hand stopping inches from her face. I'm asking you to see yourself as I do, not as a mistake, as a possibility. Elena felt the hunger rise in her then, not for blood, but for something she had no name for. Connection, recognition, home. She pulled his hand to her throat, felt the pulse of her own half-dead blood racing beneath the skin. If I do this, she said, if I accept this bond, what happens to me? Adrian's hand trembled against her neck. You choose. You can live as you are, half and whole at once, and I will spend eternity making sure you never feel rejected again. Or you can drink from me and become fully vampire. You'll lose the humanity, but you'll lose the hunger too. You'll lose the pain. And lose myself, Elena finished. Yes. She pulled away from him, walking to the window. The mountains were dark, ancient, eternal, witnesses to 1,000 stories like this one. I need time, she said. You have until dawn. Adrian's voice was gentle, but underneath was steel. After that, the bond will start to consume you both. We'll be forced to complete it, or we'll both go mad. Elena didn't sleep that night either. She sat in the library, surrounded by his books, volumes in languages she didn't recognize, filled with thoughts and confessions and the desperate poetry of a king who'd learned too late that power was nothing without someone to share it with. By the time the sun touched the horizon, she knew what she had to choose. Chapter 3. The Taste of Forever. To love an immortal is to agree that your heartbeat will always be borrowed time, and to accept it anyway. Elena found Adrian on the balcony as the first light bled across the sky. He looked diminished in daylight, more human, more vulnerable, a pretender to eternity caught in the weakness of dawn. But his eyes were alert, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin sing. I'm not choosing, she said. Not yet. Relief and disappointment warred across his features. I need to understand what this bond means, all of it, not the poetry, the truth. Elena stepped closer. If I accept you, what do I become? Adrian took her hand, and she felt it immediately. A current running through her blood, warm and ancient and utterly alive. You become a bridge between two worlds, neither fully vampire nor fully human, but something new. Something that shouldn't exist but does. Something... He paused. Something that changes everything. How? Elena's voice was steady now. The fear had transformed into something harder, more crystalline. Purpose. The Dhampir has always been considered an abomination because we believed it was a waste, vampire power diluted by human weakness. But you... He lifted her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart didn't beat. You contain both. You feel what humans feel, but you have our strength. You hunger as we do, but you have their conscience. You're not diminished, Elena. You're evolved. She wanted to believe him. Every cell in her body was begging her to believe him. Show me, she whispered. Adrian's fangs descended slowly, deliberately. There was no seduction in it, no hunger, only intention. He bit into his own wrist, blood blooming black and ancient against the pale skin, and he offered it to her. This is the bond, he said. This is what we are. Elena hesitated for only a moment. Then she brought his wrist to her lips. His blood was nothing like human blood. It didn't taste of iron and salt, it tasted of starlight, of centuries, of every moment he'd survived and suffered and endured. It tasted like home, like recognition, like a key turning in a lock she didn't know she had. The world exploded into sensation. She felt Adrian's memories flooding into her, not as images, but as emotional truth. She felt the weight of his crown, the loneliness of ruling monsters, the desperate hope he'd clung to across 300 years that someone like her might exist. She felt his first love, a woman named Catalina, who'd aged to dust in his arms. She felt his guilt, immense and suffocating, for all the blood he'd shed to maintain peace. She felt his love for her, Elena, this girl he'd known for 3 days, this impossible bridge between worlds. And he felt hers. He felt her in the clinic, holding the hand of dying strangers because no one else would. He felt her hunger, sharp and relentless, every moment she denied her nature to cling to humanity. He felt her terror of being alone, her shame at what she was, her desperate desire to matter to someone. He felt the moment she realized the only person who would ever truly see her was him. When Elena pulled away, she was gasping. "Now you know," Adrian said softly. "Now you know what it is to be known." Elena looked down at her hands. They were glowing faintly in the dawn light, her veins traced in gold beneath translucent skin. She felt it then, the bond, a ribbon of consciousness wound through her blood, connecting her to him in ways that transcended language or logic. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Adrian said. "For 3 centuries, I've been afraid of many things, but never of this, never of you." The sun climbed higher, and Adrian pulled her inside, away from the light that would burn him. In the darkness of the library, surrounded by centuries of secrets, Elena made her choice. "I'll accept the bond," she said, "but I won't become fully vampire. Not yet. Let me stay in between. Let me keep the parts of me that are human, even if it means I suffer." Adrian smiled, a real smile, not seductive or calculated, but genuinely moved. "That's very you." "What do you mean?" "Choosing the harder path, choosing to hurt. It's why I love you already, Elena. It's why I'll spend the next 300 years, or 3,000, making sure you never regret it." He kissed her then, and it tasted like redemption and ruin, like forever and right now, like 2 broken things finally making something whole. The CTA came not as words, but as the echo of a truth between them. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Chapter 4. The Covenant. Every kingdom has rules, every paradise has a price, and every love story written in blood must be paid in kind. The Moldovianu estate had more rooms than Elena had seen in her entire life. Adrian showed her to chambers that existed in controlled darkness. No windows, but instead skylights that filtered moonlight through blue glass, creating an eternal twilight. The walls were hung with tapestries older than nations, and the air smelled of myrrh and ash and thyme. "This was Catalina's room," Adrian said quietly. "I haven't touched it since her death in 1612. Elena walked slowly through the space, running her fingers across furniture worn smooth by centuries of use. On a dressing table lay a brush with dark hair still tangled in its bristles, a relic of a woman dead for 400 years. "Tell me about her," Elena said. Adrian was silent for a long moment. "She was everything you're not. Beautiful in the way that made grown men weep. Simple. Content with eternity, as long as it was spent in darkness." He paused. "I realized too late that I didn't love her. I loved the idea of loving her. I loved the escape she offered from ruling. What happened? I drank from her one too many times. Her heart couldn't sustain both the bond and her mortal body. She died at 37, aged to dust in my arms. Adrian's voice was hollow. I tried 5 times after her, Elena. 5 times I told myself I could do better, that I could love without consuming. I was wrong every time. Elena turned to face him. Why should I believe I'll be different? Because you're already consuming me, Adrian said simply. I can feel it. The bond isn't one-sided. You're taking from me, and I'm taking from you, and neither of us is diminishing. That's the difference, Elena. That's the reason the old stories never worked. They were always one-sided. The vampire king or queen giving everything to a mortal who could only receive. But you? You're a vampire too, in your way. We're equals. A bell tolled somewhere deep in the mansion. Adrian tensed. The Covenant meeting. I'd forgotten. Covenant? Elena felt a flutter of apprehension. The rulers of all the Carpathian clans. They gather once per season to settle disputes and maintain the peace. He hesitated. They need to know about you, about us. Elena's stomach dropped. They'll reject me. Everyone always does. Yes, Adrian agreed, and she appreciated the honesty. Many of them will, but I am their king. If I recognize you as my bloodmate, then you are untouchable. They will have no choice but to accept it. The great hall was carved from black stone so old it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Torches burned along the walls, casting writhing shadows across the faces of the assembled vampires. There were perhaps 30 of them, lords and ladies from every corner of Romania, creatures who'd survived centuries through cunning, cruelty, or both. All eyes turned to Adrian as he entered, Elena's hand in his. The silence was suffocating. This is Elena Marcu, Adrian announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Dhampir, bloodmate of the Moldoveanu Covenant. She is under my protection and the protection of this house. Any who challenge her status challenge my rule. A woman stood, tall, with skin like marble and eyes like chips of ice. A Dhampir? Her voice dripped venom. My lord, surely you jest. The half-breeds are abominations. To claim one as a mate is to pollute the bloodline. Her blood is stronger than yours, Countess Draculesht, Adrian said coldly. I can taste it. She has survived 23 years of dual hunger without killing a single human. That takes more discipline than any of us possess. Or it makes her weak, another voice called out. A man with scars covering half his face. Half measures, half heart. Elena felt Adrian's grip tighten on her hand. But before he could respond, she stepped forward. I am what I am, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the hall. Not by choice, by biology, by accident of birth. If that offends you, then I accept your contempt. But I won't apologize for existing. The silence deepened. Then slowly, Adrian began to smile. She stays, he said, and any who dispute this will face me in blood trial. No one rose to challenge him. Elena realized then that Adrian was more than a king. He was a legend, and even legends commanded fear. As the meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, a young vampire approached, beautiful, with dark eyes and hair like midnight. She couldn't have been more than 20 when she'd been turned. Forgive them, she said softly. They're afraid. Afraid that if the rules can change for you, they might change for anyone. Who are you? Elena asked. Vera. I was turned by Adrian 50 years ago when I was dying of consumption. He saved me because he was lonely. She smiled sadly. I think you saved him instead. Elena wanted to ask what she meant, but Adrian was already pulling her away, back toward the private chambers. You were incredible, he whispered once they were alone. Did you feel the room shift? You have no idea what you did in there. You claimed your place. I was terrified, Elena admitted. Courage is being terrified and speaking anyway. Adrian pulled her close, and this time his kiss tasted like pride, like ownership, like the dangerous sweetness of being seen and chosen. But as dawn approached, Elena lay awake beside him in the blue-filtered darkness and wondered, had she chosen this life, or had the bond simply hijacked her will? Chapter 5. The Hunter and the Hunted. The true test of a bond isn't how it feels in paradise. It's what you do when the world tries to tear you apart. The letter arrived by courier 3 days later, sealed with red wax and blood. Adrian's face went gray as he read it. "What is it?" Elena asked. "The Vatican." He handed her the letter with shaking hands. "They know about you, about what you are. They're calling it an abomination. They've sent a hunter." Elena had heard the stories. Priests and exorcists trained since childhood to hunt and kill vampires. Some were zealots, driven by faith. Others were simple executioners. All of them were lethal. "How do they know?" she whispered. "Someone from the Covenant told them. Someone who wants me weakened." Adrian's eyes blazed with rage and something else. Fear. Real fear. "We have to leave, tonight. I have a sanctuary in Prague." "No." Elena stood. "No, we run and they'll chase us forever. That's not a life, Adrian. That's not a bond." "I won't lose you," Adrian said fiercely. "I can't." "Then we face them." Elena surprised herself with her own certainty. "Together, show them what we are. Show them we're not monsters." Adrian grabbed her shoulders. "You don't understand. Hunters don't see reason. They see sin." But Elena was already moving, her Dhampir blood singing with a clarity she'd never felt before. She could feel Adrian through the bond, could sense his fear and his rage and his desperate love for her. And underneath all of it, she could feel something else, his strength, his will, his 300 years of survival. "Teach me to fight," she said. The hunter arrived that night. Father Matthias was small, wiry, with eyes that had seen things no human should see and survived. He stood in the courtyard of the Moldoveanu estate at midnight, a silver cross in one hand and a vial of holy water in the other, and he smiled. "Come out, abomination," he called. "Let the girl face judgment." Adrian started to move, but Elena stopped him. She walked into the moonlight alone. Matthias's smile faltered when he saw her. "You're half human. I can taste it." "Yes," Elena said, "which means I can do something your hunters can't." She moved in the way Adrian had taught her, faster than human sight, but not with the preternatural speed of full vampire. In the space between heartbeats, she crossed the courtyard and disarmed him, the cross and vial clattering to the ground. Matthias didn't reach for them. Instead, he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Impressive, but you can't hide what you are. The church has resources you can't imagine. Armies, centuries of knowledge. You'll be hunted until what?" Adrian emerged from the shadows, his eyes gleaming crimson in the darkness. "Until you succeed? You won't, Father, because we're not what you think we are." "You're demons," Matthias spat. "No," Elena said quietly. "We're survivors. And we're done hiding." She bit her wrist, not deeply, just enough to break the skin, and held it out to the priest. Matthias flinched back, but Elena didn't move. "My blood is human," she said, "and vampire, neither and both. I've never killed anyone, Father. I've only ever tried to save them. In the clinic, I've sat with the dying when their own families abandoned them. I've held their hands and eased their pain. Is that demonic?" Matthias stared at her, his certainty cracking like thin ice. "She speaks truth," Adrian said. "We are not the enemy you've been taught to fear. We are people. Broken, yes. Dangerous, perhaps. But people nonetheless." The priest slowly lowered his hands. "The church won't accept this." "Then the church will have to adapt," Adrian said. "Or it will become irrelevant. The choice is theirs." Matthias left before dawn, and Elena never learned what he reported to the Vatican. But there were no more hunters sent. The bond, she realized, wasn't just about connection. It was about standing together against a world that wanted to tear you apart and refusing to let it. That night, Adrian gave her a gift, a ring made of silver and black stone, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "This is the mark of a Moldovianu, mate," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "It means you're not mine. It means we're ours." Elena looked at the ring glinting in the candlelight and felt something shift inside her. Not quite acceptance. Not yet. But closer. Chapter 6. The Memory of Blood. Every immortal carries a graveyard inside their chest. Eventually, their lover must learn to walk among the tombstones. Adrian took Elena to a room she'd never seen before, hidden behind a bookcase in the library, accessible only through a passage so narrow they had to walk sideways. Inside was a single room, lined with paintings, hundreds of them, thousands. "These are them," Adrian said softly. "Everyone I've loved, everyone I've lost." Elena moved slowly through the room, studying faces frozen in oils and pigments. A woman with red hair and a sad smile. A boy who couldn't have been more than 16. A man with scarred hands and kind eyes. Woman after woman, each one rendered with such tenderness, such desperate love, that Elena felt tears burning her throat. "Catalina," Adrian whispered, pointing to one. "She was my first, my heart's first breaking. After her, I told myself I would never love again. It was safer, kinder." He paused. "I was wrong. Not loving is a slow death." "How many?" Elena asked. 7 that I've turned and tried to bond with. 14 more that I've loved as a human loves, without the bond, which is why they died." Adrian's voice was hollow. 42 that I loved in passing and forgot. And then there was you." "I'm going to die too," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Adrian took her hand. "But not for a very long time. The Dhampir ages slowly. You might have 500 years before your body begins to fail. And by then—" He smiled sadly. "By then, I'll have learned to accept it. Or I'll join you willingly." "That's not mercy, Adrian. That's just a longer tragedy." "Yes," he agreed, "but it's our tragedy. That makes it bearable." Elena spent the next week learning Adrian's history through his memories, not just through the bond, but through stories and confessions whispered in the dark hours before dawn. She learned that he'd been human once, turned by a vampire queen who'd claimed him in revenge against his father. She learned that he'd spent his first century in rage, murdering indiscriminately, until a human woman, Catalina, had taught him that power meant nothing without conscience. She learned that he'd spent the last 200 years trying to make amends for the blood he'd spilled, all while knowing that amends could never be enough. And she learned that he loved her not despite her dual nature, but because of it. She was proof that transformation was possible, that monsters could change, that even creatures born from darkness could choose light. One night, during the CTA moment, when their connection felt most profound, Adrian held Elena close and whispered, "If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts." Elena realized then that he wasn't just speaking to her. He was speaking to the world through her, trying to explain what it meant to be unmade and remade by love. Trying to justify a bond that shouldn't exist and yet did. That night, they made love in the blue-filtered moonlight, and for the first time, Elena didn't feel the hunger, not for blood, but for escape. The hunger had transformed into something else: recognition, connection, the desperate certainty that this, finally, was home. Chapter 7. The Choice. Every love story has a moment where the lovers must decide. Do we surrender to what we are, or do we fight to become something new? The vampire who came to the estate was ancient, older even than Adrian. She moved like smoke, and her eyes were the color of old blood. "You are the Dhampir," she said, without preamble. Her accent was Transylvanian, her vowels clipped and precise. "The mistake, the miracle. I am Elizaveta, and I have ruled the Northern Territories for 800 years. I've come to make you an offer." Adrian stepped between them, but Elizaveta waved a hand dismissively. "Not you, boy king, her." "I'm not interested in offers," Elena said. "Not even the offer of immortality without losing yourself?" Elizaveta circled her slowly, like a predator assessing prey. "Adrian will age differently than you understand. The bond will keep him tied to your pace, which means he'll grow weak as you do. But if you drink from him, if you complete the transformation, you'll match his immortality. You could be together, truly together, not as a temporary arrangement, but as eternity itself." Elena felt the temptation like a physical thing, to not have to watch Adrian grow weaker as she aged, to match him stride for stride through the centuries. "It's a lie," Adrian said quietly. "You know it. I know it. If she completes the transformation, she stops being Dhampir. She loses the very thing that makes her whole." "Yes," Elizaveta acknowledged. "But she also stops suffering. Isn't that worth the cost?" Elena looked at Adrian, then at the ancient vampire, then back to the ring on her finger, the symbol of a bond that had changed everything. "No," she said simply. "Suffering is part of what makes me human, and I'm not ready to let that go." Elizaveta smiled, a terrible, knowing smile. "Then you're braver than he is, child. Most people would have chosen the easy path by now." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "When you're ready to be immortal, call my name. I'll be waiting." After she left, Adrian pulled Elena close, and she felt him trembling. "I would have let you go," he whispered. "If you'd chosen her offer, I would have released the bond and let you live as a full vampire. You know that?" "Yes," Elena said. "That's why I trust you." That night, Elena stood on the balcony overlooking the Carpathian peaks and realized something profound. She was no longer running from what she was. She was no longer trying to be fully human or fully vampire. She was finally, impossibly, wholly herself, a creature of contradiction and grace, broken in ways that had made her strong. Adrian stood beside her, and without words, they agreed on what came next. Chapter 8. Eternity Begins. And so the Dhampir and the king chose the hardest path, not the end, but the continuation, not the answer, but the beautiful, terrible question of what it means to love when love means forever. 5 years later, Elena stood in the clinic in Bucharest, a young vampire doctor with no pulse and endless patience for the dying. She'd taken Adrian's advice and used her dual nature to help others understand what it meant to exist between worlds. The patients didn't know what she was. They only knew that her hands were warm and her voice was kind, and somehow, in her presence, death became less terrifying. Adrian had stepped back from his role as king, passing power to Vera, who'd proven herself more just and more forward-thinking than any ruler who'd come before. He spent his days researching Elena, trying to understand the genetic quirk that had created her, hoping to help other Dhampirs who'd been abandoned or hunted. At night, they lived in the Moldoveanu estate or in a small apartment Elena had insisted on in the city. They read together. They made love. They fought about philosophy and blood rights and whether mercy was weakness or strength. They were, in short, ordinary, except that ordinary meant forever. Ordinary meant watching the city change around them across decades. Ordinary meant knowing that one day, perhaps centuries from now, they would face a choice, and when that choice came, they would face it together. One night, Elena felt something shift in the bond. A question rising from Adrian's side, urgent and tender. She found him on the balcony, holding a small glass box. Inside was a piece of paper written in a handwriting she recognized as her own. "Will you marry me?" "That's not fair," Elena said, laughing through tears. "You did this using the bond, using my own words against me." "Yes," Adrian admitted. "Is that a no?" Elena took the paper and read it again. Somehow, across the connection between them, she could feel him, feel his fear and his hope and his desperate certainty that this was right. "It's a yes," she whispered. "It's always been a yes." They married in spring, in a small ceremony in the mountains, witnessed only by the stone and the snow and the eternal sky. Adrian wore black velvet. Elena wore white silk. They exchanged rings that glowed with the same silver and black stone, matching mirrors of a bond that had transformed them both. The vows they wrote themselves, and they were not the vows of normal lovers. "I promise to love you across centuries," Adrian said. "I promise to learn from you, to grow with you, to accept that this love might be my last and greatest redemption. I promise to be whole," Elena said, "to never apologize for existing, to love you not because I have to, but because I choose to every single day, to be the light in your eternal darkness." When they kissed, it felt like creation, like the world reshaping itself around their connection. Later, as they lay tangled together in the dawn, Elena whispered, "Do you think we're monsters?" "Sometimes," Adrian admitted. "But I think that perhaps monsters are just people who refuse to be what the world demanded. And that's brave." Elena traced the silver ring on his finger. "Will you tell me about them? All the ones you lost? I want to know them. I want to remember." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her to the room of paintings and began to speak. He told her about Catalina and her laugh like rain. He told her about Marcus and his dream of building bridges. He told her about each one, not as tragic memories, but as beautiful moments that had shaped him into someone capable of loving Elena. And as dawn broke over the Carpathians, Elena realized that she was becoming immortal, not through blood or magic, but through memory, learning to carry the weight of Adrian's past so that he no longer had to carry it alone. The bond hummed between them, alive and electric, a third presence that was neither of them and both of them at once. It would endure, Elena knew, as long as they both lived. And if, someday, one of them fell to time or fate or choice, the other would carry the memory forward. That was their eternity. Not an escape from pain, but a transformation of it. Not an answer to the question of what love meant, but a beautiful, terrible willingness to keep asking it again and again across centuries if necessary. In the blue-filtered light of the Moldovianu library, surrounded by the ghosts of all the loves that came before, Elena and Adrian stood together, Dhampir and king, monster and savior broken and whole, and they chose once more to continue. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned. Fim, the end.